So I want to talk about table salt and its usage, or rather reduction when it comes to hypertension. In this very long article, it discusses the fact that how sodium has an effect on blood pressure and the advantages of lowering our salt intake in order for us to be able to lower our blood pressure, hence prevent quite a bit of chronic diseases, specifically to do with cardiovascular disease, stroke being actually one of the first things that we want to prevent. One of the interesting things that I found in this article was basically that the big one is inflammation, actually, and water manipulations. If I may use a very crude way of actually explaining this. Good morning, friends. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jessica, and I engage in conversations about weight loss, weight-related disease education, and how to achieve weight loss in an affordable way that honors your way of living. And today we're talking about salt. Yes, and I personally love using it because I love salt. So one of the things that I actually found interesting, and I wanted to discuss this with you today, was the fact that while it is definitely one of the strategies being used by physicians as the first line of defense when it comes to lowering your blood pressure, is just cut off the salt, use more Mr. Dash, or just lower or just be mindful, is the fact that it works in terms of, I think there's a little bit of a threshold. Now the WHO, or rather in that article that I just showed you, there is a recommendation, I think, between 1.5 and 2,000 milligrams of salt per day is the recommended limit within that range. Now, I think, though, in essence, while I was researching, I found something very, very interesting. There was a few doctors, or at least one, Dr. Fung, on YouTube, who's a advocate of saying that, salt is actually not the culprit, it's actually the attaching nutrients that come against with our processed foods. And while he had papers, the British Journal of Medicine, and other papers that he was actually scrutinizing the literature. One of the things that was interesting to me was that actually I saw another TikTok, Dr. Attia, who I like to watch him a lot, is that he mentioned that as well, in terms of like saying that in actuality weight loss is actually much more advantageous than actually just getting salt out. Now, he had as a guest a nephrologist, so it just came out, I believe, so you could find it. And so he mentioned the fact that so he said basically that the reason why salt actually try to lower that is because it really affects the kidneys, because the kidneys are not able to process it because there's inflammation in the kidneys. That's what basically the crass explanation is. In terms of what he added to the conversation is how do we improve blood pressure in terms of protection. So So do I want to have a conversation about that? Is because it's interesting because when I was diagnosed with high blood pressure at the time, one of the things that my doctor did suggest is that I actually get rid of the salt, which I didn't do. I actually chose weight loss. So I always wondered, and maybe we can have a discussion, which I think is just very interesting. I always wondered whether it was the intake of food that I had was it was correlated to the amount of salt that I was taking, although it seemed like I was still salting my food, but because I wasn't eating processed foods, that my salt was naturally down from what it originally was, which I'm sure it was high. So that's why I always wondered, you know, where's the cart and the wheel type of thing. So it's interesting that while I was doing this research, is that these little nuanced information come out after, interestingly enough, you see textbooks, and I did browse or I just skimmed through a lot of the studies, and a lot of them don't have that premise. They always say it's just salt is one of the strategies we really need to take advantage of in order to actually target. And I would say that if anything, it does have a lowering of the mercury points or whatever. Where do I want to go with this? Is the fact that I think in general weight loss would be advantageous. Definitely watching your salt, but I think that if you naturally get rid of the processed food and you start cooking at home, like I make my own burgers, I think naturally there is that tendency to control your salt. Having said that, I do not want to dissuade you from going to your doctor and having this conversation with them, because, you know, again, it's one of the things that I always wondered, and I thought maybe I should have a discussion with you about it in terms of how my journey and how I use salt. I do it in my salads. I do cook mostly at home, especially during the week, and that's how I control it. But I really found interesting that Dr. Fung and Dr. Attia had little clips in their discussions. I didn't see the full discussion, the paid discussion. I saw the TikToks and the unpaid discussion about hypertension and salt from Dr. Attia, which I recommend. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and I will see you Friday.